And I'd like to welcome our first moderator, Cody Holthouse with the Oregon Department of Agriculture.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here and talk about all things invasive pests with a couple of just excellent entomologists and pathologists. Um, and I'll go ahead and get it started here. I think I've seen a number of you in some of our other meetings. Excited to see you here this morning. Our first speaker this morning will be Wyatt Williams talking about emerald ash borer. This is a hot topic in Oregon right now, and so I think there'll be a lot to learn here. Wyatt has been with the Forest Health Unit of Oregon Department of Forestry since 2012 as an agency's invasive species specialist. His work has led to the detection of new exotic forest insects in the state of Oregon, including emerald ash borer, as he'll talk about today, as well as Mediterranean oak borer and a number of other species. Wyatt received a PhD in entomology from Colorado State University in 2012, publishing in the field of evolutionary ecology, a plant defense theory. For his Master of Science degree in Boise State University in 2007, he studied the behavioral ecology of Douglas fir beetle during outbreaks in Idaho. Wyatt has conducted plant ecology research in Panama and Costa Rica and has worked in academia, government, and private industry. He is a trained observer in the annual fixed-wing aerial survey for forest health and has been deployed in over 20 large wildfires in his role as the state's incident command manager, team manager for wildfire protection, excuse me. Wyatt lives in Salem, has two daughters, 8 and 11, and his dog Harley. And I think you're going to enjoy hearing from Wyatt today. I know I always do. Wyatt, I'll give it to you here. I'll let you know when you're coming up on your time for questions at the end of your talk.
Okay, thank you. Am I coming in okay, Cody?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear,
Okay.
Wyatt.
Well, thanks for moderating, Cody, and thanks for everyone for being here today. And special thanks to Julie and Margaret for organizing today. I'm going to be giving you an update on emerald ash borer. And I first want to say that there are literally hundreds of people that are working on emerald ash borer now since its detection on June 30th, 2022. And it's amazing to see all the work being done. And I hope I do my colleagues justice today. I'm going to be sharing a lot of data from a lot of people that are working on emerald ash borer in Oregon. So first of all, just a background, it's one of our most highly destructive forest pests in the United States. And the larvae, they do the killing. They feed under the bark, and the population density gets so high that eventually the tree gets girdled and it essentially starves to death. So in 2002 was first detection of EAB outside Detroit, Michigan. And I'm going to show you a time frame here, 5-year increments of the invasion in the United States. And so within 5 years, it had been detected in pretty much every county in Michigan. And in another 5 years, it expanded to several other states, about a dozen states. And then in 2016, it made it to outside Denver, Colorado. And by 2023, we have now detected it in Oregon in 2022. So it is in 36 states and counting and continuing to spread across the United States. So one of the reasons why we're concerned about it in Oregon is because we do have a native and highly susceptible ash tree. Fraxus latifolia is our only native ash tree. It's important in riparian systems, especially in the Willamette Valley and the Umpqua and the Rogue drainages. It appears to be pretty important for stream shading and bank stabilization. And we know that there are some threatened and endangered species that have habitats in Oregon ash. So this is what it looks like from a fixed-wing aircraft. This is the Tualatin River, and you can't see the river because it's almost 100% shaded by ash canopy. There's some other trees in there as well. But this is a view looking north towards Forest Grove and Cornelius to the east there. All those red stars, by the way, are positive trees. And so that's one of the messages today. The bottom line is that the EAB is in this natural system and it's going to continue to spread over time. Here's another look outside Forest Grove, looking west towards the Pacific Ocean, Gales Creek. And you can see that as soon as you start getting about 500 feet elevation, and definitely by 1,000 feet elevation, the ash starts to peter off and we get more red alder. So this is really kind of a low elevation plant species that's associated with riparian systems. This is a very, very common scene across the Willamette Valley. It's already a highly fragmented and altered landscape, lots of agriculture, lots of modification to habitat. And ash is one of the things that's kind of been constant. It's connects all these corridors. Also, it occurs in these swales or wetlands where it's almost 100% ash in these low-lying areas. And it seems like no other tree can grow in these really saturated soils, clay soils. So this is what we can expect in Oregon, unfortunately, in some of those areas. On the left is a current picture of Ankeny National Wildlife Refuge, south of Salem. And on the right is after about 10 years of EAB feeding in a black ash stand in Virginia. The life cycle is kind of what you would expect of a holometabolous insect. We start with the gravid females are flying in the summer, and they're finding a tree to lay their eggs on. And so I highlighted a couple important things here during this life cycle. First is the adult emergence period when the females are flying around. They do disperse, but it's usually just really short distances, like the neighboring tree or even the same tree. They don't fly very far, but they do lay their eggs. The eggs hatch, the larvae enter the tree, and they go through 4 moltings during the summer. And then the other important part that I'm highlighting here is the larvae become pre-pupae, and sometimes they overwinter in a sapwood. And you can see a significant amount of time they are in the sapwood, or they have the potential to be in the sapwood. So they spend that winter as pre-pupae, and in the spring, the pre-pupae develop into pupae, and then adults emerge, starting again in June. So as I said, the pre-pupae are in the sapwood, and this is cause for concern. And so we have a quarantine right now on ash material, all solid wood material from ash trees and white fringe tree, which I'm not going to talk about, but white fringe tree is also a host. So it is prohibited to remove solid ash material outside of Washington County right now. And there are some treatments where ODA is allowing stuff to move across the line, but it has to be treated to destroy the developing larvae. So that means debarking and removing the sapwood, grinding, heat treatment, burial, or burning, or making products. The other thing too, and this has to do with the life cycle, avoid removing ash during the flight period when the adults are flying. And then October 16th through April 30th, that's when the pre-pupae are in the sapwood. This is when things can get transported, but then they have to be processed by May 1st. So there's a big public education campaign, Don't Move Firewood. And in Oregon, we are subscribing to this. We are getting the word out not to move firewood, because that is our #1 way of dispersing EAB long distances. So the females only fly maybe a mile or 2 or less, and humans are responsible for transporting this insect longer distances. This is a picture of what it looks like and how fast trees can die. One thing I want you to take away from this picture here is you don't really start seeing signs, above ground signs of the attack until about year 4. But if you were to look under the bark, you could see more and more larval density until eventually, after year 4, the cambium is girdled and the tree will quickly die. So keep in mind this infested year 5. Well, I'll show you this next picture, because this is what it looked like on July 1st, 2022 at what we called ground 0. And I want to give credit out to Dominic Mays from the city of Portland, who made this first detection and reported it immediately. And without Dominic's keen eye, this could have gone on undetected for several more years. But there were 16 ash trees in the parking lot. Many of them looked like had been attacked for several years, probably that 5 or 6 year mark. And they had all the classical signs that had the D-shaped exit holes, woodpecker holes. We had some bark splits and galleries, and we even had adults flying around and dead trees. So if we were about at year 5 or 6, and now we're about year 7 in the Forest Grove vicinity, we can expect over the next 5 years to have a lot of dead trees. And that is another message I want to keep conveying to people. We still might be early in this infestation, but there potentially could be a lot of dead trees to come. So this is going to affect a lot of people, not just natural areas, but definitely in our urban forests. And we've been very proactive in communicating with the over 20 communities around Forest Grove about how to manage for emerald ash borer. So there's a couple just brief things I want to mention here. Can't really get into too many details, but first is think about your removal, replacement, and restoration. You can time your removals. You don't have to do it all at once. You know, think about preemptive versus reactive. And tree replacement, thanks to George Kral and Dave Shaw, we have a nice guide to alternatives for ash. And obviously, there's going to be differences in planting and management in natural areas versus park areas to consider. There is a successful treatment for urban forests, and that is the systemic insecticide emamectin benzoate. It is very, very effective if you treat the tree before it is infested, especially before 30% of the canopy is in decline. You can still protect that tree. But this chemical has to be administered by a licensed applicator, and it has to be repeated every 2 to 3 years. So here's an example of some financial planning. This is for the city of Portland, and these slides were developed by our EAB support specialists here at ODF, Evan Elderbrook and Leila Gonen. And so this is for, I believe, all the street trees, all the street ash trees in Portland. If you were to remove all of them over 10 years, it would cost about $12 million. And then we have some replanting costs, so total cost to replace and remove all ash trees would be about $16 million. However, if you think about alternatives, you could treat some of those, say all the trees that are in good condition, over 8 inches DBH, and remove and replace all the others, you could have some cost savings. So that's two extremes to think about, but we're trying to get communities to plan for this. Here's another one for Eugene, about 8,700 ash trees in their inventory. And so again, over 10 years, if you were to remove all of these, it would be about $6 million to plant, to replant, another 2.8 million. So about $9.5 million for Eugene to do that. Versus if you were to treat all those trees with chemical insecticide, it'd be about $3.2 million. And then here's another alternative down here is selective treatment. So choose the trees that are providing the most benefits and protect those. And you can have some cost savings. I just want to give a shout out again to Evan and Leila. We have this tree plotter inventory and the software available on our website. And there's a EAB cost calculator where you can go in your community and play around with these numbers. You can adjust the DBH. You can put in variables for the number of trees and the years of your program and so on and so forth. Very, very handy. So now I'm going to shift gears and talk about survey and management of emerald ash borer in Oregon. And we have a lot of ongoing programs. It blows me away how much work has been done in about 18 months. So first, we have the survey column over here. We have individual tree surveys. We have a trap survey. We have a plot network. We have public hotline reports. And we have this survey from girdled trees in the SLAM program. And moving over to the right, SLAM is slowing ash mortality. And so that is a management strategy that Oregon Department of Agriculture is bringing to us in Oregon. We have just infested tree removals in the city of Forest Grove and vicinity. We have a biological control program now that's been initiated here in Oregon. And of course, we have the insecticide injections. And I'm not going to talk about this, but there are people working on ash progeny testing to see if there's any resistance for EAB in our natural or in our native ash. But before we all get started, one thing that ties the surveys and management together is we need a better map of where the ash occurs. And Oregon ash is a species that wasn't really studied very intensely until about 10 years ago. In 2018, my agency produced this for the statewide plan. And the way this map was produced was we looked at every Huck 12 watershed where there was a confirmed presence of a wild occurring ash. And we put that on the map. So this is showing the general risk for policymakers and natural resource professionals where emerald ash borer risk occurs in the state. But we know that not all the Willamette Valley is covered in ash. So we definitely need a better resolution for survey and management. And this is where a really exciting project from Sean McKinsey here at ODF and some of his partners at Metro who provided some of the data for him. We have a pretty nice map now of the Portland metro area. And this is a model prediction using Sentinel-2 imagery. It was field verified and it has pretty good accuracy. For some of these hardwood species, we're in the 90% accuracy. And it's at very fine resolution too, a 20-meter resolution. So if we just look at Oregon ash, you can see all the orange in here, so where we predict Oregon ash to be. So this is very helpful for surveys and management. Next, I'm going to show you some survey results here. And so this is ODA's EAB public dashboard. And I have some live links here in my presentation. Hopefully you can visit those later if you want. I also tried QR codes in here, and yesterday when I used my phone, it worked. So if you're interested, I do have a few QR codes on the following slides. But this QR code will go to the public dashboard, and you can see real time where individual surveys of trees have been conducted since 2022. One thing I want to point out is over 5,000 trees have been individually inspected by ODA and its partners. And to do this, a person needs to be trained in how to identify emerald ash borer, and they have to have access to the survey form, both of which ODA can provide. And so there's a lot of people that surveyed for ash trees in the last 18 months, and we know that we've found it at 190 trees, so about 3.5%. And the total infested area is about 10.5 square miles, all centered around Forest Grove. The next survey was the EAB trap survey. And thanks to USDA APHIS and Mariah Davis, we were able to get several hundred traps available for Oregon. And there are two main trap types. There's these purple panel traps and the green funnel traps. And I'm not going to get into the specifics, but we provided, Mariah provided the traps to local governments, and I also helped deliver those and set them up. And so we have several different communities trapping for that. But at the end of the day, all these traps were negative. We do continue on doing the trap survey again in 2024. And so if you are a local government, please contact me or Mariah Davis and we can help you get started. The trap season is May to September. The next one is this ash plot network. And this is for long-term monitoring of ash forests. So we want to get a snapshot in time of what these ash forests look like right now. So we're in this baseline stage, and we're going to track these forests over time through infestation, mortality, and eventually recovery into some stable state. We're following methods from Kathleen Knight and her colleagues, where we have these 1/10 acre plots. There's 3 per site. And we, in 2023, initiated 3 sites at ODF. And I know OSU and partners have also followed the same methods. So we have some plots out there on the landscape where we are measuring and tracking ash trees for these types of things like DBH, height, crown class, crown condition, and EAB status, which, by the way, in all of these 169 trees, they were negative for EAB at this point. And we also did some drone flights. So we have some imagery before and hopefully during and after. The next survey type is the public reports, and we have an official reporting tool for invasive species for the state of Oregon, and that is administered to the Oregon Invasive Species Council and Portland State University. And big thanks to Portland State for keeping this going. So this is a public reporting tool for any invasive species. You don't need to log in. You can use your mobile phone, and it uses the GPS in your phone, and you can upload pictures. It's very, very handy. So what happened in 2023? We had 77 public reports, which is way down from 2022 after the media blast about EAB being confirmed in Oregon, where we had over 200 reports, the public hotline. In 2023, we had 77. We had 43% just totally unidentifiable because the submitter did not put enough data in there. But 6% were positive for EAB. All were within Forest Grove. But this is good that the public is using this, I think. We still have some problems with misidentification. People think the golden buprestid and the western cedar borer look a lot like EAB. Maybe if you're an entomologist like me, you don't think so, but people get these confused a lot with EAB. Okay, now I'm going to move on to management. And
Just a heads up, Wyatt, you got about 2 minutes.
okay, thank you. Perfect. So slowing ash mortality is a kind of our proven method of managing EAB on the landscape, and ODA has been in consultation with Nathan Siegert. For 2023, it was our first year doing this. And so ODA girdled 109 trees in this ring right here. And the girdled trees are super attractive for flying EAB. Then nearby trees were stem injected, so any spillover would be killed. Those girdled trees were felled in the fall, and then 1 meter bolt sections were peeled. That way you could quantify EAB by density and by geography. So here's a picture of what that looks like. These 1 meter bolts. Bring them back to a barn owned by Metro. Here's Nathan Siegert right here. And we count larvae. So in those girdled trees, 17 of them, 16% had EAB, a total of 221 occurrences of EAB. And we know the hot spots now. So we can adjust where our SLAM is going to be for 2024. And so this is ODA's SLAM plan, the red. Green is going to be what's called century trees. So we're just going to have some trees out here girdled looking for EAB. And the blue is sink, where we can kind of pull in, attract, and destroy EAB. Biocontrol in purple. So huge kudos to Matt Mills, ODA EAB survey coordinator. Finally, biological control. I'm not going to say too much about this, except it is a very robust component of IPM, and 3 were released in 2023. The results are pending, and there's going to be more releases. These are really good at finding and destroying EAB. There have been 194 total tree removals so far from these different activities, and we have 100 more to remove before May around forest growth. And thanks to state funding and U.S. Forest Service funding for this. And then finally, I want to give a shout out to Cody here, who is leading our EAB task force, meeting monthly, very open and transparent. The work is divided into these 7 subcommittees, and you can find all of the monthly transcripts here on the Oregon Invasive Species Council webpage. There are a ton of resources you can come check out later. And that is my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic, Wyatt. Thank you so much. You encapsulated quite a bit there. That's a hard task, so appreciate it. Very informative. We do have a few questions here for you in written form, and I can go ahead and read those if you're okay with it, and you can respond. The first question is from Aaron Ruark. It says, is the hardwood map of the Portland metro area available online?
Yes, we are working through our GIS department to get that posted. In the meantime, people can email me for a copy or the layer. So please contact me if you want the layer of that.
Great. We have another question here from Ty Seifert. Is there mitigation in the transportation of olive trees into Oregon's potentially transporting of EAB? Olive ag is trying to be established in the valley.
Yeah, cultivated olive, I didn't mention that, but cultivated olive is a host of EAB. We do have some specialty growers here. And I know, Cody, your agency is very engaged with our olive growers. And I know I didn't talk about that, but there is some work going on with the olive industry and educating them and screening them for EAB.
Thanks, Wyatt. The next question here is from Kim Deal. We have, are there any natural predators to EAB?
Oh, thanks for mentioning that. I did cut out a slide about woodpeckers. So there is expected to be an uptick in woodpeckers. And I remember reading a paper from the East where 25% or so of the predation of EAB larvae were from local woodpeckers. So yes, it's not going to slow down the exponential growth, unfortunately, but anything we can do to enhance woodpecker or bird habitat in general is a good idea.
Yeah, great point. The woodpecker papers are always really fun to read. We have another question here from Andrew Neal. says, can you comment on including Oregon ash in riparian and floodplain restoration projects moving forward?
I know that several agencies such as Clean Water Services, Metro, several soil water conservation districts in the Willamette Valley have an interest in using ash. Tens of thousands of ash seedlings have been planted for restoration. And so this is going to be a hit. I can't really sugarcoat it, but I am hopeful because we have collected seeds from over 20 populations and given them to researchers. Our seeds are currently being grown in other states right now. So there are lots of people working on the genetics, the genomics, and any sort of screening for resistance for EAB. So moving forward, we have to start somewhere. And I think I'm optimistic that within 10 to 20 years, we could potentially have a resistant genotype to put back out there in the landscape.
Thanks for that, Wyatt. The next question is from Carl Maltzen. Is there a hardwood map for the area around Brookings, Curry County?
Unfortunately, not that I'm aware of. Nothing like what I just showed at that resolution. Sean McKenzie, who developed that hardwood map, I think his plans next are to expand it out to encompass more of the Willamette Valley. And then we'll take it after that. I think it might be a little bit harder to model. It would be a different model for the Umpqua, the Rogue, and other areas in Oregon. But thanks for that question. We're very excited about that hardwood map. And if you have any feedback, we'd love to hear about it.
We'll take a few more questions here. I got to leave enough time for Christine's intro, but I think we can take one or two more here. I have one from Lynn Ahrens in the chat that says, I have a question for Wyatt. Will there be guidelines for primary processing, milling of ash to facilitate utilization while minimizing spread?
Well, yeah, there are some guidelines. So first of all, we have the quarantine, which lists some management measures. We also are working on a flow chart for wood processors, what to do with their wood to utilize it or to dispose of it. And yeah, so there are some best measure guidelines out there, and we'd be happy to help. There's constantly more things being developed, more literature, more fact sheets. And so I can't urge enough to continue to look on these agency websites right here.
Absolutely. We have a question from Ava Philippus. It says, how does ash compare to willow for stream bank stabilization?
I think they're both pretty similar, being associated with riparian areas. However, ash is a little bit unique compared to willow, and that I believe it can take even more saturated soils and more clay content. And so it is kind of unique in where it grows in some of these swales, these wetlands. Yeah, I'll just say that they're a little bit different, but they are similar in that they're both riparian trees.
Excellent. Well, I have a few more here, but I think we're going to let them go to written responses. I really appreciate all those thoughtful questions from the group. These were excellent. At this time, I'll start to transition over to introducing Christine Buhl, who I also have the opportunity to work with pretty often. And I think you're going to enjoy today's talk. Christine Buhl is a graduate of Oregon State University and the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She has served as an entomologist for Hawaii and the country of Lebanon on projects spanning from public health to chemical ecology. She currently serves as a state forest entomologist with the Oregon Department of Forestry, where she provides statewide technical assistance to public and private landowners and monitors forest health via aerial and ground surveys. Christine will be talking about Mediterranean oak borer, as you'll learn in just a moment. And I will say, Christine has been just monumental help in the way of understanding what we're up against with Mediterranean oak borer here in Oregon. So I think you're going to enjoy. Christine, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, wow. Thank you for the introduction, Cody. Make me blush. So I'm Christine Buhl. I'm entomologist with the Oregon Department of Forestry. And I first and foremost want to put forward that a big thank you to all the agencies. As you heard from Wyatt's talk, emerald ash borer kind of paved the way in multi-agency efforts at tackling invasive species. So we had a nice template there about which partners to connect with, who can do what. There's a bit of good news that emerald ash borer kind of paved that way for us for our finding of Mediterranean oak borer. And so Oregon Department of Forestry, U.S. Forest Service, Oregon Department of Agriculture, Oregon State University, those are the same folks that we see at these meetings over and over again. We're all communicating constantly, and we're reaching out to other partners, soil water conservation districts, smaller municipalities, parks, etc. So it's kind of a everybody is involved, everybody is communicating. We're all working in the background, communicating about these different insects, how we need to tackle different questions, how we need to determine where they're found, and then how to mitigate or prevent them. So with that, I just want to say thank you again to all the partners that I see here presenting today to share this information. So I'm going to start with Mediterranean oak borer. So this insect, I really want to highlight specifically the diagnostic features of determining when you have Mediterranean oak borer. It can be hard to discern it from other pests. So big keys here are that it's a very tiny insect. And as with lots of insects, you're going to see the damage before you're going to see the insect. If you see the insect at all, you really kind of have to go digging for these insects sometimes. And this insect is really, really small. So in that middle photo with the pen, to the right of that pen, that little brown dot, it's about the size of a grain of rice, if not smaller. Very, very small insect, but it can have large impacts on our landscape, such as dieback of oak. So this insect is native to Europe, all the way through northern Africa to the Middle East. So it has a pretty broad range where it's native. It was first detected in North America in Napa, California in 2017. They think likely by the amount of damage that was found, it was present since the 2010s, similar with emerald ash borer and a lot of invasive species. They're present in the background, and only when their numbers build, they do enough damage, do we actually visibly see that damage and think, something's not right here. And so that's what happened down in California. And then in 2018, a single adult individual was collected via sentinel traps, just kind of looking along pathways of where we might be first detecting invasive species. And then thereafter, from 2018 to 2022, we found additional adults in small number, but in multiple counties. So that's Multnomah County, Clackamas County, Marion, and Washington counties. And then in 2022, we also detected trees that had died and had Mediterranean oak borer in them, and then had the pathogen that they are vectoring staining their galleries. And so I'll talk more about the specifics of that pathogen, but we found 2 infested trees, one in Clackamas County, one in Multnomah County. Both have since been destroyed, but then we started to find additional trees specifically within the Clackamas County area. And there are about 30 infested trees, give or take, because some of the areas, it's just a known infestation area. And while we have not seen Mediterranean oak borer in all of the oak trees in an area, we know that it's present on site. We just haven't found it yet. It could be very high up in the tree canopy. We also found a tree that's suspected of being infested by Mediterranean oak borer that's also since been destroyed in Marion County. So where are these insects coming in from? So DNA analyses have been conducted in California, they've been conducted in Oregon, and what we found is that our Oregon population originated from a different part of its native territory than the California population. What this means is that our Oregon population, as far as we know now, likely did not come up from California. But with that being said, we haven't analyzed all of the adults that we've been finding. We are looking into analyzing more, and they can still come up from California. There typically isn't one point source of entry for invasive insects. But how did they get here? So untreated wood imports are really common coming over from other countries. There are a lot of folks that are looking at this constantly, but it's really hard to find things sometimes, and things do slip through. Firewood for interstate and across state movement is really common, and then nursery stock. And so we are looking at all the ports of entry we can think about, other routes such as wine barrels that these insects may be coming in from. And so we are reaching out to all the different groups that we think may have some sort of connection to bringing in specifically oak material that could be transporting Mediterranean oak borer. So a little biology background about Mediterranean oak borer. So it is a wood boring type of ambrosia beetle. So despite the name, It does burrow into wood, primarily the sapwood, but it does not feed on the wood. Basically, it chews a gallery through the wood, and then it will be vectoring fungi along that gallery, and that fungi is what feeds its brood. And so the two fungi we have primarily found are Raffaella montitii and Fusarium solani, and those are two that are attributed to cause the fatal oak wilt that we're seeing. There are additional fungi that have been identified on Mediterranean oak borer, but we're not sure the impact of those as of yet. So also, as the name implies, it attacks oak. Now in its native range, it can attack some other species, but what we're seeing here is attack in typically white and red sections of Quercus or oak. The females are active for most of the year. They're pretty cold tolerant. They do want to stay in the tree as long as there's a good food source. There's mates that can be found. However, we did see this year active adults outside of known infested trees as late as January, or I guess I should say as early as January. It was really cold out, but they were active, not moving fast. They don't really want to leave. They don't want to burn up their fat stores. So there's no incentive really to move on, but that doesn't mean they can't be transported. For example, if folks are collecting oak wood that from a tree that we'd taken down and transporting it. So there could be beetles on the outside of that oak wood that can be transported along the way. We think there might be about 2 to 3 generations for this insect in Oregon, but that remains to be seen. We need several seasons to really determine that. We're learning a lot from our Californian partners who've been really beneficial in sharing with us everything that they know, and we share with them how our scenario is similar or different. And then one interesting thing to point out is that on the left in this picture is a female, on the right is a male, and the male has a little bit of a rhino horn, kind of an interesting little character. However, the male does not typically leave the tree. So they'll stay inside the tree, and then the female is the one that kind of wanders. Now in their native range, as I mentioned, this insect can attack oak and some other species of trees. And it's a native and native system, meaning that they've co-evolved together. And so typically the native trees that are used to Mediterranean oak borer, they can withstand attack from Mediterranean oak borer until they are stressed or damaged. We see the same thing here with our native trees and native insects. They only become pests when the trees are stressed. They can't resist or tolerate the attack from the insect. Now, because this insect has come over here, our trees are not used to this insect. And so they're not as resistant, they're not as tolerant. And so the trees that have primarily been attacked and killed in California have been valley oak and blue oak, and then some small incidences in California black oak, Oregon white, and Oregon white oak. Typically those trees, the latter two species, have been damaged specimens that the mob have attacked. And in Oregon, so far, we have only confirmed it in Oregon white oak. We are looking at all oak species, but it's only been confirmed so far in Oregon white oak. And then the 3 native oak species that we have in Oregon are primarily Oregon white oak. That's the most widespread. That's in the white Quercus section, California black oak, in the red Quercus section, and then to a lesser extent, Canyon live oak. I want to focus more so on Oregon white oak because it is most broadly distributed, and it's a really essential part of our landscape in Oregon, especially in the Willamette Valley, from the northern to the southern reaches of it, where you find oak savannas that are an important part of our landscape. These trees are long-lived. They can live up to 500 years, so they go through a lot of things year after year, living that long, a lot of storm damage, a lot of attacks by insects, diseases, etc. And they're pretty tolerant of all the things that they encounter within that time span. They're the primary overstory in savannas, and they're extremely drought tolerant and an important wildlife resource. So for nesting, overwintering, and of course for mast. So those acorns provide a lot of food for wildlife. And they're quite fire tolerant due to their thick bark, especially when they're older. And then Oregon white oak in particular is deciduous. It does hang on to its leaves for a long time, but it does drop them at a certain point and then will reflush those leaves, which is beneficial for defoliating insects that remove those leaves. They just reflush those leaves as normal the next year if their buds are still intact. And so they can kind of escape damage and therefore tolerate a high level of deciduous attack from defoliating insects. So I mentioned drought, and Oregon white oak in particular is on our drought list. This is one that we advise commonly to plant in our drought stressed habitat, which is becoming more and more drought stressed over time. So not having the ability to maintain this species, especially in areas that are getting drier and drier, is going to be pretty damaging. So we take this insect very seriously, that it could possibly be reducing the component of this super drought tolerant native tree species. And so that's kind of what we're faced with in determining how impactful is this insect going to be on our landscape. So as I mentioned, I really want to drill down on diagnosis, determining what is Mediterranean oak borer, what is not. We want to avoid false reports. We have a lot of folks with their eyes on this, but we also have a lot of other competing projects. So I really want to make clear what looks like mob damage and what does not. And I should have mentioned, we also call Mediterranean oak borer mob. So you'll hear me use that interchangeably. So typically what you'll first see that's most visible or most apparent in an oak canopy is a whole section of the crown that's died back, or a whole branch that's died back. Commonly, they will attack at the top first and then work their way down a branch down to the bowl. What we're seeing in Oregon is a little bit different in California, in that a very small amount of damage in the canopy can then start occurring down in the trunk of the tree versus that slow progressive work down. So they might be attacking at the canopy and at the tree trunk simultaneously, and that remains to be seen as we start analyzing more of those trees that we're taking down. So when you start seeing a large section of crown dieback, get a little bit closer to the tree and look for this pale boring dust. That's frass. It looks like sawdust. It's light in color, and it's in the bark crevices. It's all around the base of the tree. Certain times of the year, it washes away, it blows away. Look in spider webs, look in the moss, pull the ivy back, look behind the ivy. You will see that frass. From there, you may or may not see a hole that they use for entrance and exits. However, they're really tiny. They can be hard to spot. Sometimes they're within the furrow or the ridges of the bark, so you don't see them. But if there are any exposed parts of wood, you might see holes that are stained black. And then if you take a cross section, you'll see the gallery that branches out, kind of like it's branching from the outside in from one single point, similar to the oak tree itself. That's just kind of this branching network that overlaps with their neighboring mob. Overlapping into that sapwood. And so if you have a cross section of wood, or even on the exterior where you can see underneath the bark and look at the sapwood, you might see the staining. If the tree has dropped branches, you can look at those for galleries. However, I really want to be clear, there are a lot of other ambrosia beetles, some native, some non-native, that can be confused with Mediterranean oak borer. So if you don't see dieback in the crown, it could possibly not be a Mediterranean oak borer. It's just another insect that's just making its living in that tree. There are other insects and other things that are impacting oak trees that we also want to separate from Mediterranean oak borer, because typically they're not killing the trees, or at least they're something that the tree can tolerate for quite a long time. And so one, in recent years, we've been seeing an invasive lace bug attacking oak. And it's basically, to keep it simple, sucking the juices out of the leaves. The leaves turn yellow. So you'll see this mottled look on the leaves, and that's from this insect. But as I mentioned, they drop the leaves every year. They start fresh. Usually the trees can tolerate this damage, even though this is an invasive insect. So we definitely don't want to look at that as mob. However, this could stress the tree long-term and invite mob down the road. Those are things we just don't yet know. Another common site in Oregon white oak are little patches of dead leaves or orange leaves in the crowns. That's number 4. That's commonly caused by gall-making insects, so flies and wasps that will lay an egg in the tissue. It irritates the tissue, which expands to grow around the egg. The larva feeds from within. And then oftentimes squirrels will go digging at the grubs in that material, killing some of those twigs. Again, this can look quite damaging and extensive throughout the crown. However, they do drop their leaves. The buds aren't typically harmed. And these trees withstand a lot of twig and branch mortality over time, as they are long-lived. And so they do rebound from this. Other things I'll mention are there are different fungi that will infest oak, and then different other wood-boring beetles or bark beetles that get into the wood that create tunnels and holes. And so you're really looking for multiple different features for Mediterranean oak borer. It's that crown dieback, the white boring frass, boring dust, and then looking further, inspecting those black stained galleries. So for management, we're still learning a lot here. And so there's a lot that remains to be seen. We're working with researchers on what we can tackle. First and foremost, keep your trees healthy. In their native range, they're not attacking their healthiest trees. And so we want to keep our trees as healthy as possible. Even though oak is a drought tolerant tree, we need to do our best to promote that tree health even during the hottest summer months. Sometimes that could mean supplementing with watering. Now, I included this fact sheet, and I will provide the PDF of this PowerPoint to the organizer so that you have these links. There's a lot about watering that it's a commitment. And so if you are willing to do it, it's great, but it can be a long-term deal, but it can preventatively protect your trees from pests such as Mediterranean oak borer. But it does require a lot of water. And what we've learned from our partners in California is that observationally, trees that were watered for one night for the hottest summer months, so one-time watering for July and August, for example, up to about 600 gallons, sometimes a bit more if it's a larger tree, so it's a lot, but it's a long, slow soak overnight. That can assist these trees in rebounding insect attack. Now, this is a drought tolerant tree. However, we've had some extremely dry months and years. And so there's a certain level of moisture that these trees have grown up being used to, and they're now starting to experience some shock or just slowly being weakened over time from drier and drier years. So sometimes they could even use a little bit of help. So more information in that watering fact sheet. And then hopefully more information from us and our partners in California that we will share up here about what more can be done in terms of prevention. We are not advising preventative removal at this time. Let's keep oak on our landscape as much as possible. Even though it's dead, a dead oak is still providing a valuable resource. It's already captured carbon, it's a wildlife habitat. Now, having a mob-infested dead tree, that's not really something we're proposing. However, we just don't know enough about the level of health that trees can withstand this Mediterranean oak borer attack. And so you might have a tree that maybe it was stressed to begin with, Mediterranean oak borer attacked it and took it out, but it's not spreading to the adjacent healthy trees. So more to be learned there, but for the time being, preventative removal is not advised for oak. Once you do have a confirmed infestation, please do work with us on confirming those infestations. There are a lot of things that, as I mentioned, can be confused with mob, but we do advise cutting the infested tree to the ground so that stump is removed, and then chip, burn, or bury that material on site. We don't know how deep it needs to be buried, but these insects aren't really known to dig that much, but at least covering the material until you cannot see it above ground could provide great benefit. We're learning more from California, who's going to test this summer. And then the chipping and burning, now we realize that this is really cost ineffective. These can be really large trees, and this is a really expensive process to undertake. So we are looking into other methods, such as a partial canopy removal, for example. If you can get ahead of it, the very first indication that there's some dieback in the branches, can we just destroy that and leave the tree? We're not quite sure. So at this time, it's chip or burn or bury on site. If you cannot do that on site, covering and transporting it to an incinerator so insects are not leaving that material as you transport it is suggested. And then we don't know a lot about the fungus and how it spreads. So can it spread on equipment? So you cut an infested tree, you use that saw on an uninfested tree. Are you transporting that fungus to the other tree? Does it connect via underground root systems from an infested tree to an uninfested tree? Those are things we don't know, but it's always a good idea to sterilize your equipment, especially when you're working in an area with infestation and moving to an area that does not have infestation. So the current infestation has been identified to be centered around Clackamas County. The other trees that were outside of that area have since been destroyed. That does not mean that it's not present in other areas. We just have not found it yet. We are expanding efforts to look for it in those other areas. There is a map and there's a link on this PowerPoint to follow us as we identify where it's been found. be advised that sometimes those symbols will change if something is looked at as suspect, and then it could turn into positively infested, and vice versa, as we actually find adults in the tree to positively confirm it's Mediterranean oak borer. So sometimes there's a little variation. So if you see a dot well outside of the known area that is a confirmed infestation, that may change once we do some follow-up.
Just a heads up, Christine, you got about 2 minutes left.
Okay, sounds good. So what's next? So ongoing mapping of potentially infested trees from hotline reports, and also from field trainings and diagnosing mob infestation. So getting the word out that this is something to look for. What are the specific signs and symptoms to look for? That's really what we're drilling down on here so that we can get more detections. We're doing that by trapping, but also from visual inspections of what's on the ground. And then the trapping, which is being led by Oregon Department of Agriculture, is attempting to determine where the distribution is beyond Clackamas County. What are the potential pathways that it's coming in from? And then we're also looking at emergence timing based on temperature. When do they wake up? When are they most actively flying? When do the peak flight periods occur? And we're also trying to test management strategies. So do systemic insecticides paired with fungicides work at preventing infestation of this insect or preventing the fungus from spreading? And repellents are also being looked at. Is there anything we can put in the tree that's a pheromone that tells them go away, go somewhere else, to protect a certain tree or distribute their population on the landscape so it's not concentrated in one area? How deep can we bury the material? Can we remove only part of the canopy? And then how does the pathogen spread? So these are all questions we're discussing with our California partners. Some of these things are already being attempted this season. Things are moving quite fast because we are all communicating. And my last slide is just a sheet of resources. So we do have a fact sheet that we will keep these resources dynamic as we learn more, but our currently known information is listed in the fact sheet. There's also a fact sheet on those other known oak pests to determine what's mob and what's not. And as always, please do make reports to the invasive online reporting. We have the most eyes on that reporting system. It works very well. Include a picture, include an accurate location so we can follow up. And then you can follow along on the mob infestation map. And with that, I'll leave time for questions if there's time.
Excellent presentation, Christine. Fun to see it all in one place. I appreciate it. It's great. We do have a few questions for you. I'll go ahead and read them and let you answer them. The first one is from Caitlin Wind. Over the next decade, do you have an estimated % total population of oak in Oregon that could be affected by MOB?
No, we don't, Caitlin. So as I mentioned, there's a lot that's left to be learned. And that biggest piece that we don't know yet is how stressed does the tree have to be before it can be taken out by Mediterranean oak borer. So is it attacking healthy trees in our landscape? Or can we zero in on trees that have prior storm damage, for example? They've broken off limbs and then fungus can enter and that's rotting the interior. Are they attacking these trees that just aren't as vigorous? Because if that's the case, then there's probably a lower proportion of oak trees that are at risk from this insect. So we can't really project that out just as of yet. And I do want to mention one more thing. We can only learn so much from our partners in California about what they've seen from the initial detection, since they're a bit further along than we are, because they are seeing a little bit different attack from Mediterranean oak borer. So as I mentioned, ours, well, in California, they attack at the top, move down. In ours, that may not be the case. They're also only attacking Oregon white oak in California that were fire damaged. Not their healthy Oregon white oak. And we're also seeing primarily unhealthy white oak, but there have been some healthy oak that have been attacked. So a little bit different there. So we can't project out based on what California is seeing. They have different oak species that are being attacked and a little bit different situation, possibly stemming from different populations in Mediterranean oak borer because they have a broad native range. So they could have a little bit different ways of working in terms of their biology in Oregon from California.
Thanks, Christine. Next one is from Faith Dewitz. Says, has there been research looking into how MOB will impact prairie oak woodland habitats?
Not as of yet. There's a little bit out of California. A lot of stuff out of California is observational or not published yet. We can't speak to it. But obviously, we can't really make that direct comparison from California to here because our oak savannas are different. So again, we're not quite sure how this is going to impact those landscapes.
Great. Next question is from Caitlin Wind. How long does it take for a single tree to die from this pest?
Yes, so what we've been tracking is that, for example, we're not sure of when it first got infested, but there was a tree in Wilsonville that we first looked at 2021 that looked like it wasn't doing well. From the base, walking around the base of the tree, we did not find Mediterranean oak borer. We did find other ambrosia beetles. That tree was in a heavily stressed environment. It was growing on a corner where its roots were constricted by road, sidewalk, and we were called out because there was construction that was occurring. So the city of Wilsonville has a lot of construction occurring, new developments, a lot of new folks moving into that area. And so there's construction everywhere. And in this area, we were called in to determine how far out they should avoid having equipment moving around this tree so it didn't damage the tree roots and compact them. When we got out there, it just looked like an area that an oak tree would not be happy. So that could have invited the Mediterranean oak borer. However, we were seeing crown dieback in that tree immediately. And so it could have been already attacking at the top. So we're not sure if it was a primary or secondary reactor to the already occurring stress to that tree. But that tree, when it was taken down, it was not fully dead, but a lot of the canopy had died back at that point. I would say about 3/4. And so that took about 2 years to get 3/4 dieback. But I suspect that that insect had been in there maybe even an additional year or two. So it could be 4 years. But again, just speculating, we don't know yet. We haven't had a long enough period of time to track it in our Oregon white oak in Oregon.
Great. Next question is from Ryan Siebold, and this will be our last one. Then I'll move on to the introduction of our next speaker. Is crown dieback of Oregon white oak also an indicator of extreme drought? Can dieback be indicative of other pests in Oregon white oak?
It could be. So one insect I didn't cover, but it is in the other oak pest fact sheet, is carpenter worm, which is a moth that typically will attack a stressed part of the tree. Often what happens is storm damage occurs first, and then those branches break off. They allow fungus to enter. The carpenter worm smells the ethanol that's released. They're stressed, and so they come in, they start attacking, and carpenter worm will attack one area one after the other for years. And then that basically what they're doing is they're burrowing into it, reducing the structural integrity of that spot. That can spread to adjacent branches. And so more branches could die back. So that's a big one that I see that could look like Mediterranean oak borer. However, if you get closer, you may not see that boring dust from Mediterranean oak borer. But yeah, there's anything that could impact the branches that's mechanical damage, that could be drought damage. I haven't seen a single branch die from drought stress in an oak tree. More it would be an overall stress of the canopy. But other insects could cause a single branch dieback that can be confused with Mediterranean oak borer.
Excellent. Thank you, Christine, for wonderful presentation, and appreciate the questions. Anybody that had any unanswered questions will receive a written feedback. Our next presenter will be Gabi Ritokova, and I'm excited to get to know you better, Gabi. I've seen a lot of your work, and I've kind of been peripheral to what you've done here in Oregon, and I'm new on the block, so excited to learn from you selfishly. But yeah, I'll tell you a little bit more about Gabi, and then I'll let Gabi take it from there. Gabi is a native of Slovakia, received a BS in environmental science at UC Berkeley in 2003, where she also worked with insects associated with pitch canker in pines and sudden oak death. She continued to work with pitch canker as a graduate student in plant pathology at UC Davis. She came north to the Promised Land in 2012 and worked for the Swiss Needlecast Research Cooperative at Oregon State University for nearly 10 years before becoming the forest pathologist at ODF in late 2021. Away from work, besides spending time with family, she likes dogs, reading, traveling, anywhere and anytime, and exploring cultures and languages. And Gabi, you'll be talking to us about, I'm almost forgetting your topic here, invasive pathogens And again, I'm always in the insect world, and I think the pathogen side is something that we always want to hear more about. So take it away. Excited to have you.
Can you see my screen, Cody?
Yep, I can see it. Yep.
Okay, great. I really appreciate a nice introduction. Thank you so much. You also made me blush. In my talk today, I will cover the sudden oak death program in Oregon. And first, I'll cover background of the disease. Then I will move on to the monitoring and management, dip into some history of sudden oak death in our forests, followed by the most recent detections in the woods. I will also wrap up my presentation by talking about our plans for 2024. Just like my colleagues, Forest Health colleagues, I want to acknowledge the longtime collaborations and that were involved in the sudden oak death program in Oregon. Oregon Department of Forestry works closely with the Oregon Department of Agriculture, the U.S. Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and Oregon State University, including OSU Extension. We also work with Oregon Task Force and the Association of Oregon Counties. And I just want to point out that none of the work would be successful if it wasn't for this collaboration. Background information on the disease. Sudden oak death is an exotic disease caused by the pathogen, non-native pathogen called Phytophthora ramorum. It is a relatively new pathogen and it has worldwide importance. It causes extensive death of tan oaks and coast live oaks in California. And in Oregon, the sudden oak death infestations are concentrated on the coastal fog belt and are closely associated with the range of tan oak. The pathogen kills trees by causing cankers on the main stem, just like we see here, eventually girdling the tree. The same pathogen is killing Japanese large plantations throughout the United Kingdom, causing the disease to be called sudden large death as opposed to sudden oak death. Duck fir and grand fir mortality has been observed when these conifer species grow near infected larch. In Oregon, tan oak drives the epidemic as it is highly susceptible and it produces a ton of spores that spread the disease. This pathogen infects a huge diversity of plants. It has a broad host range of over 200 plant species, including several plants that are native to our Oregon's forests. These plants only also become infected when they grow near infected tan oaks. The name sudden oak death is misleading because there is this lag period between the initial infection and the development of the visible symptoms. It takes months and sometimes years for an infected tree to die. This lag period is a challenge for early detection and rapid response because the disease can spread during this period. The origin of Phytophthora ramorum remains unknown, and we do not know its native range or its complete distribution. So the pathogen does very well in southwestern Oregon. It's wet and cool coastal climate. It can spread in several ways, and one of them, as you can see on the left, rain and fog wash spores from infected canopies of trees onto tree trunks and shrubs and adjacent vegetation. Or wind and rain carry spores from tree to tree or across the landscape. Spores can be carried by the wind sometimes as far as 5 miles per year. And lastly, people can transport spores by moving infected material, whole plants or plant parts, or infested soil. Infected nursery plants are one example of human dispersal. So what do we do about the disease and management? The current Slow the Spread program uses early detection, monitoring, and eradication treatment in areas outside the generally infested area to slow disease intensification. And I will explain what generally infested area, or GIA as we shorten it, is later on. The program consists of 5 components as they are outlined on the slide. The most of the original discoveries of sudden oak death were made by aerial surveys with ground verification. The program now relies on multiple survey methods to detect new infestations, and these include aerial surveys, ground-based transect, stream monitoring, and also orthoimagery to detect dead tan oak trees. So the first component includes surveying and detecting the disease. Identification of the disease usually starts with aerial surveys. As we find these pockets of mortality, or sometimes only individual trees, these yellow or brown canopies that are seen here, we follow up with ground verification of symptoms. Aerial surveys cover at least 700,000 acres of forests and are conducted from fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters. These aerial surveys occur 4 times yearly, with the primary surveys occurring in July, when the current year tan oak mortality is most visible. The current sudden oak death program also uses high-resolution digital imagery to augment aerial surveys. Ground-based detection surveys that follow cover over 600 acres of forests and are done year-round. As I mentioned, these ground verifications are done after the completion of aerial surveys to check suspects that we observe from the air. And what happens, we have foresters that go out to the field. They carry sampling kits with hatchets and collect samples in the field that are then promptly sent to the Oregon State University lab to identify the causal pathogen. That would be Phytophthora ramorum. And based on finding infected trees, delimitation of treatment areas follows. Oregon Department Sod Crew also conducts transect surveys for landowners that are interested, or they request pest-free certification of timber grown within quarantine areas. Ground surveys are also carried out in high-risk areas based on risk models and stream baiting results, which I will talk about soon. These surveys are very effective for early detection, but they're also costly. So there are a couple of ways spores and sporulation can be monitored in the field. One is by setting stream baits in watersheds. And this practice involves submerging rhododendron and tan oak leaves, putting them in a mesh bag and submerging them in streams, and then testing the samples for the presence of the pathogen. It is done in high-risk streams within and outside a quarantine area. Additional streams near nurseries or other non-forest sites may also be baited. Stream baits are generally deployed in early spring and collected at 2-week intervals for a minimum of 8 to 10 months. These surveys provide good early detection. However, when we get a negative sample or negative result, that doesn't necessarily mean that the pathogen is not present in the drainage. Last year, in 2023, we monitored 63 basins, and of these 63 basins, 10 follow the National Stream Monitoring Protocol, requiring testing by 2 labs. Any positive results are used to set the priorities for the ground survey. Next is delimitation and treatment that are intended to eliminate the pathogen from infested sites. So what happens when a new infestation is detected? The site is treated by cutting, piling, and burning all host plants within a specified buffer. On most sites, herbicide is injected before cutting to prevent stem sprouting, but that is only focused on tan oaks, not necessarily on rhodies or huckleberries that we sometimes treat as well. Eradication treatments are most effective when they're carried out promptly and with the largest treatment buffer possible. Over time, treatment buffers have ranged from 100 to 600 feet from infected trees. 600-foot buffers are most effective at containing the disease. Treatments are expensive, and the cost can reach anywhere between $3,500 to $10,000 per acre. It all depends on the host density and the site conditions, and whether a hand crew or a machine crew can take care of the problem. We have learned that eradication treatments can eliminate a disease from a site and stop its spread if the infestations are detected early and treatments are completed promptly at the proper scale before the disease can spread. This does not always happen due to funding, landowner permissions, competing high priority sites, and lack of contractor availability. Through the Slow the Spread program, more than 9,000 acres have been treated, including some host removal ahead of the disease. Approximately, as you can see on this graph, 28% of these acres are on federal land, and the rest is on private and state lands. This is a screenshot from the Oregon sod dashboard, which is up and running and available for anyone to explore. The dashboard is updated regularly, and it's based on GIS data that ODF and Forest Service sod staff provides. Current and historical data is available, as you can see here on the dashboard, starting from treatment information, whether the treatment is active or completed, to samples collected in the field and laboratory results. The dashboard also provides a map that you can see here. Pardon me. This map shows locations of current and past sod infestations and management activities to slow the spread of Phytophthora ramorum in Oregon. And for folks that are interested in sod, I really highly recommend exploring the dashboard. And a lot of useful information about sod is also available on the ODS Forest Health website, both of which Christine and Wyatt had on their presentations. I want to provide historical background, highlight the multiple introduction of sod to Oregon and the expansion of the disease. So the disease in Oregon was discovered in 2001, but most likely was introduced to Oregon in 1998 through infected nursery stock from California. At that time, the Oregon program aimed to eradicate the disease where all infested sites received some level of treatment. That same year, a sudden of death quarantine was established. On this map, the quarantine zone is delineated by yellow and black, as you can see here, dashed boundary. After the first detection, a second introduction of the NA1 strain, which is the North American strain 1, was found in Cape Sebastian in 2010. In 2012, the program designated a generally infested area that I mentioned earlier, where no treatment is required. The disease within this area is too widespread to control. The GIA delineated by a red and black dash boundary. You can see all around here. In 2013, a new and more aggressive strain of the pathogen EU1 was discovered. EU stands for European strain. This prompted the expansion of the quarantine zone in 2015 to 515 square miles, which encompasses about 30% of Curry County. Over the years, the disease has been spreading, and in 2019, ODF decided to prioritize all EU1 infestations within the quarantine for treatment on private and state lands. The federal agencies continue to treat the disease on their ownership. In 2020, once again, newly infected sites were detected using orthoimagery since aerial detection surveys were put on hold due to COVID. As a result, the generally infested area was expanded for the 6th time. A new strain of Phytophthora ramorum NA2 was detected in April of 2021. It resulted in establishing an emergency 3-mile quarantine around the area where it was discovered. And these boundaries are delineated with purple and black dashed line around Port Orford. The last new detection was confirmed by lab analysis in early spring of 2023 after a sod forester sampled suspect tan oaks in December of 2022 in the Humbug area.
Just a heads up, Gabby, last 2 or 3 minutes here.
Okay, great, thank you. I'll fly through the next slides. A little more insight into quarantine and a map that shows quarantine expansion over years in yellow and black dashed line and a GIA in red and black dashed lines that I mentioned. So through the authority of the Oregon Department of Agriculture, a sudden oak death quarantine was established in 2001, which restricts the movement of host plant material out of the area and requires eradication treatments on private and state-owned lands. Our federal partners, BLM and Forest Service, conduct eradication treatments on their ownerships as well. So what started as an eradication program in 2001 shifted to the current slow to spread effort in 2010. I do want to shift. There we are, focus on the 2 most recent detections. In April 2021, an OSU researcher driving from Brookings to Corvallis noticed red and dying tan oaks on Highway 101 near Port Orford. Here is a picture of what she saw. She took samples from the site, and those samples were confirmed at the OSU Forestry Pathology Lab as Phytophthora ramorum. Further lab testing at OSU showed the pathogen strain to be NA2. This is the first time it had been identified in trees in the wild, and it is believed to be a new introduction into Oregon's forest. In the past, the NA2 strain was found in nurseries, but not in forests. As a result, ODA established an emergency 3-mile quarantine, as shown in that map previously. To give you an idea of what the drive-by on 101 looked like, here's a photo of the dining tan oaks in Port Orford. This was the first detection of the disease in Port Orford. For folks that are not familiar with tan oaks are evergreen trees. So the brown color that's seen here indicates mortality. Since the initial detection in Port Orford in 2021, ODF SOT crews have worked on obtaining permissions from landowners and taking samples within a 1-mile radius of the Highway 101 infected trees. ODF, Forest Service, and OSU staff continue to survey around the Port Orford infestation. In late 2023, new infected trees have been detected to the north and west of proposed treatment areas. Tentative 600-foot treatment buffer has been placed around the confirmed positive trees with 540 acres untreated. ODF has 28 acres under active treatment within the proposed treatment area. In 2023, the crew completed treatment on 350 acres, which is up from 141 acres that was completed in 2022. I will fly through these 2 slides, but I think they're really important to mention. In December of 2022, a sod forester found dead tan oaks outside of the Port Orford emergency quarantine in the Humbug State Park, right down here, undeveloped area. What was interesting about this whole thing is that in 2022, we scanned the most recent high-resolution imagery, and we didn't see any tan oak mortality. Multiple trees in the field were sampled and first sent to OSU for Phytophthora ramorum confirmation. Further analysis by OSU ODA and USDA APHIS provided official confirmation of Phytophthora ramorum from the samples. And the lineage testing came back as a mix of NA2 and EU1 strains. So this is the second time that the NA2 lineage was detected in wildlands after the Port Orford infestation in 2021. Since December 2022, 60 samples from the area have tested positive for the pathogen. Since a large area is under the state park's ownership, ODF and the Oregon State Parks and Recreation Department are working closely to complete treatments. Work continues on 165 acres of OPRD land and also on 88 acres of private lands. With the new detections, ODF is working together with Forest Service, ODA, and OSU on determining the new quarantine boundaries. We held a sudden death task force meeting at the beginning of January where we discussed a quarantine expansion. It is a lengthy process and it does involve multiple steps. And this is my last slide. So sod has a potential to spread in southwestern Oregon, as I mentioned, that through that range of tan oaks. The distribution of tan oaks stretches into Coos County, Douglas, Josephine counties, and thus far we kept the disease in Curry County. Based on the tan oak distribution, as you can see on the map, the yellow color on the map denotes a high risk level, and the red is a very high risk level. On the last note, just wanted to mention what our plans are for 2024. We continue to focus treatments in the Port Orford and Humbug areas. Those are our priorities. And for 2023, the annual fixed wing survey, which we flew in July, was the top priority for the Cooperative Aerial Detection Survey. We flew 2 helicopter surveys, one in May, where we identified 25 new individual dead or dying tan oaks from the air. And the second helicopter survey was flown in midsummer after the fixed wing survey. We are now gearing up for the first helicopter survey of 2024. Our Forest Health Unit just brought on Sean McKenzie, an ADS specialist, who will be leading the ADS program at ODF in close collaboration with Forest Service Aviation Group. With his help this year, we aim to complete the 4 helicopter surveys and 1 fixed wing survey. So as we know what happens after ADS, all trees identified from the air are tracked by ground survey and are sampled. Currently, sod foresters are scanning high-resolution imagery for 2023 to identify dead tan oaks. We will obtain the new 2024 imagery in July when disease symptoms are most visible. Again, in 2023, I just want to recall 63 streams inside and outside the sod quarantine area are monitored from the first deployment. We're monitored from the first deployment of these baits in early May through the beginning of December when we pulled the last baits and send them to OSU for analysis. In 2024, we aim to continue to monitor streams in the same area, as well as add a few baits to the network based on the most recent detection. And that is all I had. And I'm sorry, I probably went over my time limit, but I will be really happy to answer any questions and type them up if necessary.
Thank you so much, Gabi. Really appreciated the presentation. Neat to see that time-lapse map too. That was very informative. I appreciate it very much. We do have time for a few questions here. It sounds like Dan also is going to be letting us bleed into his time a tiny bit too. Dan, I might just go a minute or 2 into yours and you can tell me if I'm wrong on that. I will go ahead and start reading some questions here though. I'll start with the question and answer portal. And I see there's some in the chat as well, and I'll get to those where we have time. The first one is from Michael McWilliams, and it says EU1 in Port Orford, exclamation mark. I don't know. I think that's more or less just a comment.
Yes, it is more of a comment, and Michael is a colleague of ours, a plant pathologist.
Awesome. Thanks for that. The next one is from Margaret Banks. is there a concern that sod will slow the growth of DF? If so, how far north might it eventually go, and how much might it slow DF growth?
Hi, Margaret. I don't think there is a concern that sod will slow the growth of Douglas fir. Douglas fir has is also one of the hosts of sudden oak death. However, it only gets affected if it is in close proximity to tan oaks. We're not worried about slowing the growth of Douglas fir. Unlike,
Thanks.
as you know, Swiss needle cast that does that.
Great, thank you, Gabi. I'll move into the comments here in the chat really quick. Let's see here. This is from Dan Stark, our next speaker. He asked, should folks outside of the GIA be concerned about sod? For example, Piramorum was confirmed in a small community garden in Lincoln City, mostly on rhododendron, but also on other native susceptible plants.
Okay, I'm still reading. So whether folks should be, could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the main question
didn't see
was,
that.
should folks outside of the GIA be concerned about sod?
As far as Southwestern Oregon goes, yes, they should be concerned about sod. Yes, we did find that infestation in Lincoln City, which is northwestern part of the state, but it was not in the wildlands. It was found in botanical gardens. It's good to keep our eyes open and know what sod looks like, what the hosts are, so that we can report what anyone can report seeing out, whether in botanical gardens and in the wildlands, and let us know. And based on that, we will continue the treatments of the disease.
Excellent, thanks for that
Yes, sir.
answer, and thanks for the questions. I have another one here, and we'll do this as the last question. It's from Dave Shaw. Gabi, how many times has sod been introduced into the South Coast area? Is it still being introduced somehow?
Yeah, so we know about those 4 separate introductions that I outlined in that historical slide. And this last introduction, we don't have enough information where this could have come from. And this is something that we're tackling with Oregon State University Forestry Lab. They're going to be doing a further genetic analysis after they determine what strains are we're dealing with. But we do need more work and research done associated with these most recent introductions.
Excellent. Well, really appreciate the talk, Gabi, and excellent questions here at the end from the audience. I appreciate all the feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we'll move on to our next speaker here, who is Dan Stark from Oregon State University. Dan, as you're building out your slide share there, I'll read your introduction. Dan Stark is an OSU Assistant Professor of Practice and Forestry and Natural Resource Extension Agent who serves Clatsop, Tillamook, and Lincoln counties. Dan's background and experience is in forest health, specifically tree-killing bark beetles, forest pathogens, and fire. His main program areas are native and invasive insects and pathogens, as well as wildland fire. Dan is also the lead for the statewide Oregon Forest Pest Detector Program and serves as committee lead for the Emerald Ash Borer Training and Technical Assistance Subcommittee of the AB Task Force. Dan, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Cody. Hi, everybody. Really excited to talk to you about this. You've been hearing a lot of information from our specialists and our experts on some invasive pests here. And so I'm going to talk to you about what you can do if you have an issue. Let me make sure I have an issue advancing the screen. So let me make sure I take care of that. Okay, so really I'm going to talk to you about reporting suspected invaders. You heard Christine mention that she referenced the Oregon Invasive Species Hotline, and I'm going to be talking to you about that. One way that she mentioned that is helpful is determining, where these pests are in Oregon. And so they're really helpful in creating these maps. So I'm going to talk to you about how you can report these. Okay, so where should I report findings? Let's say you have, I'm going to talk to you about emerald ash borer in the context of emerald ash borer, but Mediterranean oak borer or some other invasive pests that might be out there. Oregon does have other invasive pests that are being monitored for currently. So where can you report these? Let's say you have something, you're concerned about ash in your neighborhood and you see some symptoms. So what should you do about that? Go to the Oregon Invasive Species Hotline. I mean, that's the #1 place to go. There are some other folks you can reach out to first. This is where we'd like you to report them. I always have to put in a plug for your local FNR extension agents. They can help you navigate through a lot of these things. There are a lot of other great resources available from Oregon Department of Ag and Oregon Department of Forestry and others. So you are well taken care of when it comes to this kind of thing. So please reach out for assistance. So that is www.oregoninvasivehotline.org, and you can go there and check that out. I am one of the monitors who checks that out and looks at what people submit, and then if I need to, I let the experts know that they need to check this out. So we'll talk to you a little about the networking behind that too. Okay, so what to report? Here is a checklist for you. Photos, as best as you can, take a photo. Now you probably will not see these insects. A Mediterranean oak borer, or even the emerald ash borer. What you've heard from our experts is that they spend a lot of time either inside of the tree or up high in higher parts of it. So what really you are going to see are these symptoms or these signs. So one of the best things that you could do is get a photo. So here we have some pictures right here looking at some exit holes. Take your phone out. Most folks have a smartphone now. You can get them pretty cheaply now. You might want to get one if you don't have one. They're pretty dang good too. It's kind of amazing the pictures you can take on our phones these days. Pretty amazing stuff. So snap a picture, get as close of detail as you can. There might be a photo of some of the other symptoms that we heard about. Was this some of this epicormic branching and some of this advantageous shooting that happens on an Oregon ash? So you might want to snap a picture of that, or some crown mortality, perhaps. And if you live near an oak and you start to see some oaks declining, get a picture of those symptoms as best as you can. That will help immensely the folks who are reviewing on the invasive hotline. So detailed notes on the location and descriptions that you find. This stuff will be stored, when you report this, and then if need be, and if the experts look at it and see that, oh heck, this might be in the area, they can go back and reference your notes and really look at the things that you took. I saw this, near milepost so-and-so on this place, near these trees, or, I live in this place, I live outside of Forest Grove, and, this is what I'm experiencing and what I've seen lately. So any notes like that you could make and send along, that's helpful as well. If possible, collect the specimens. Now you'll have to keep those in the freezer or someplace cold until a confirmation is made, and then an expert will most likely reach out to you. So you might see an insect that you think is emerald ash borer. So you can pick that up if you're those kind of people who are okay with picking up the creepy crawlies. I am. And stick them somewhere cool. Stick them in this plastic baggie or a little container and keep them nice and cold until someone might get back to you. Just as our experts pointed out, there are a lot of lookalikes in Oregon, especially for emerald ash borer. So you might see one of our natives, which is also cool. Okay, so what happens to your report once you've submitted then? So these reports are monitored by the Animal Plant Health and Inspection Service. So that's APHIS, Oregon Department of Agriculture, Oregon Department of Forestry, and OSU, FNR Extension in particular, and others monitor this hotline. You will, I was supposed to do this fancy little highlighting of things here and I forgot to do that. Okay, so let's see. Oh, and it's not looking for me, so we'll just bypass that anyway. Okay, you will receive a confirmation email. Forget that animation feature in the future. Okay, you will receive a confirmation email on what if you're what the results of your report are, whether if it's being helpful or just kind of the state of where you are with that. Then what happens is if everything seems legit and it's like, oh my gosh, this does look like it could possibly be one of these pests by some of these experts that monitor it. They will go and visit the site by the agency and confirm it or not, take samples, whatever they need to do. If there is a positive detection, that will trigger a multiple agency response, much like you've heard about here with our all of our pests here, really, emerald ash borer, mob, Mediterranean oak borer, and also sudden oak death on Phytophthora ramorum. So multi-agencies involved in this. Y'all are in good hands. We have folks who are really working hard to keep our forest healthy. And just amazing folks. So this multi-agency response is really crucial, especially in early detection. If there's a negative detection or negative detection, it's like, yeah, that looks like it might be it. Either we don't have enough information or that's probably something different. We're not really sure, but it's not that pest that we're concerned about. There won't be any kind of regulatory response or anything like that. Okay, here are some useful resources for you. We've heard some other ones too, so I'm just going to talk to you specifically about a couple of ones that are near and dear to my heart. So anything that you want about Oregon ash borer, emerald ash borer, I'll call it the Oregon ash borer now, the emerald ash borer, you can find at our OSL extension, Emerald Ash Borer Resources site. There is a link there to a lot of the other sites that you've heard about today. You can scan that. I've shortened that down a little bit for you, so you can just go to beav.es/C5R. That will get you there, or you can QR code this. I'm also the lead for the Oregon Forest Pest Detector Program. So I am benefit from a lot of great groundbreaking work from my colleagues who got this program going. You've heard from some of them on our talk this morning. Others are present here. What this is an early detection program. It's available for free. You can go and learn about emerald ash borer right now. We still have it on there as an invasive because it still is, but it is presently in Oregon. Plans are underway to hopefully get a module there on the Mediterranean oak borer. So stay tuned on that. Like I mentioned, this is free. You can go through this module training. It's self-paced. At the end of that, you'll be put into a pool of people who will be trying to offer trainings as best as possible. I'll be trying to offer trainings so for in the field type stuff down the road, so you can see this stuff out in the field. Lots of other resources available for you. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So this was a quickie for me. I have plenty of time for questions.
Perfect on time too, Dan, and great presentation. Thank you. It's wonderful. I will open up any question answer form. It looks like our question answer portal is empty there. I don't see any questions in the chat yet. If anyone wants to raise their hand using the raise your hand little emoji down there, you can do that and indicate to us any questions.
In the meantime, oh, sorry, go ahead.
We did have one come in. I apologize. It looks like it's from Wyatt Williams. It says, can you stress to listeners how important pictures are for hotline reports? For the EAB reports, 43% were not identifiable. If they could just include at least one picture of the insect or tree, great.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, hey, I think I may have seen this at this one place is great. That's good information. That's not quite what we want to get at the hotline yet. I mean, we'll keep it there for sure in the back of, the experts will think about that area. But, it really is when you have these pictures so you can show what you're seeing, right? Is this really what we're looking at? Those really are crucial. Like just was highlighted here. What Wyatt said, there are a lot of them are just, a large percent of them are just, are just tossed out. So the more you can have those pictures, the better. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Try to take a picture, far back if you can, so you can kind of get an example of what the surrounding, ecosystem looks like, or the habitat that tree might be in. That's always a good shot to take. And then also something up close. So the symptoms or the signs that you're seeing, either it's that exit holes, that powdery white frass at the bottom, in the bark crevices in an oak tree, or in spider webs, mortality in the crown, anything like that, anything you can get a picture of would be super fantastic. If you need help with doing that kind of thing, reach out to your local extension agent. They could help you with that.
Thanks, Dan. Well, I don't want to eat up any more of the break. There is a 5-minute break here between my section and yours is up next. So I'll let everybody get to that break. I think you're back here right at 10:15. But thank you, Dan, and all the speakers in my group. I really appreciate all of your hard work on this.